Welcome to the American Academy of Grief Counseling's Videogram on attachment disorders. And in grief counseling, attachment disorders do play a role in complicating losses because within every relationship, there is an attachment of some type, whether hopefully a healthy attachment, and in some cases, unfortunately, an unhealthy attachment. When loss occurs, those who are already even dealing with a healthy attachment to the person that has passed away can struggle through the process of grief and adjusting to that loss. But those with unhealthy attachments will have various complications sometimes attached to it, or maybe they don't care enough, or maybe they care too much. And this can lead to complications in their grieving process itself. Now, attachment and human bonding is something that is extremely important because human beings, as social creatures, need to form bonds for survival. This is especially seen in infancy and the toddler age, where human beings and babies, for the most part, right, form their very first attachment with the primary caregiver. And that primary caregiver will play a huge role in the development of the child and how they view attachments with others. Can they trust other individuals that care will be given? Have they been loved? Have they been respected? Or instead, have these children, these infants, toddlers, have they been left to cry for a long period of time without being given any type of sympathy or not having their needs met? So when needs are not met at a very young age, trust and lack of trust can occur for that child. And this creates later in life unhealthy attachment disorders that can occur. John Bowlby, a famous psychoanalyst, studied the impact of early attachment and the bonds that children have with their primary caregivers. And what he saw is that secure attachments occur for children whose needs were met. When the child cried, they were held and comforted. When the child was hungry, the child was fed. So a healthy attachment stems from a healthy childhood where the infant is cared for as needed. When that care is not given, attachment disorders will later manifest in life. So children who are not given this manifest various disorders. In the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders, there are two types of attachment disorders: disinhibited social engagement disorder and reactive attachment disorder, or inhibited. And within these, we see a variety of characteristics or styles of attachment issues where we see insecurities in terms of anxiety, avoidance, and disorganization, and how an adult later in life will form relationships. So in uninhibited social engagement disorder, which again is due to the child not receiving the care and forming the secure and healthy bond that the child needed, the individual is uninhibited and looks for superficial bonds that were not given to them at a young age. So children themselves will exhibit a lack of shyness with strangers and look to find the need of this type of bond. As adults, these individuals will move from relationship to relationship, forming very superficial, loose type relationships that really lack any meaning. Now, in the reactive attachment disorder, which is inhibited, the individual actually will not wish to form bonding with anyone. They will avoid bonds and never, ever really become close to anyone. They have no desire. One of the big characteristics is a lack of trust that one has in these relationships. And that's due to, again, the fact that as a young child, trust was not given. Instead, they were mistreated. They were left without love when they cried, and their needs were not met. In both disorders, whichever direction one will go, meaningful relationships and new bonding abilities are altogether hindered or preventable within itself. Now, within certain relationships, there can be an anxious, insecure type of characteristic that is created when anxiety is the extreme characteristic. And this can lead to a child that is excessively clingy and also a very scared child. In adulthood, this type of clingy relationship can turn into one that is highly possessive. There's a complete lack of trust. The individual is in constant need of approval and might even turn to substance abuse. So these types of clingy relationships aren't good for the child, but they definitely aren't good for later in life when the individual attempts to have a relationship with someone who might have a more secure bond. And then they have to learn how to understand why their partner is exhibiting this anxiety. Now, avoidance is another quality that comes from an insecure relationship. These types of individuals may be very avoidant to physical touch. They might be very closed to sharing their emotions. They're characterized in an inability to maintain relationships because they push loved ones away before they can be hurt. They feel fear of opening up to another one. They have a lack of trust. They're distant and aloof. And they've learned, because of not being cared for, that self-reliance, caring for themselves, is the only way to get something done. So it is important that healthy bonds are formed at a young age to avoid these types of attachment disorders later in life. So in a secure attachment, a child's needs are met and the emotions of that child are recognized. The primary caregiver is available to the individual so that the child can grow with trust and love. And in adulthood, instead of seeing anxiety, clinginess, or complete avoidance, or a complete ability to form a bond, we see a person who is healthy, who is available, who is sensitive to other needs, who is responsive to others and accepting to others. Those suffering from attachment disorder, though, need reassurance. They need emotional discussion. They need schedule, and they need consistency and boundaries to be able to better deal with it. So an individual who's not dealing with attachment disorders is going to find themselves very overwhelmed when trying to make a relationship work with someone who experiences these things. And in it, it's going to involve a lot of work, a lot of assurances, a lot of discussions, setting consistency and schedules with this individual, but also letting them know that there's boundaries. Now, when loss occurs, obviously, there's going to be a variety of complications for a person who's been avoidant in a relationship or one who's been too anxious in a relationship, and how these losses occur, how the loss occurs within them. It might involve guilt to some extent. It might involve extreme sadness over losing someone. It might create a very higher level of anxiety for this particular person, and they would be more likely to fall into substance abuse because of all the other things that are going on within their mind. And because of the inability to form a healthy attachment, they have a hard time properly grieving that attachment in itself. So if counseling occurs and one is dealing with an individual who has various attachment disorders, whatever direction it may be, and whatever primary characteristic that might manifest, it's important to emphasize and understand how this attachment disorder is affecting the loss itself. We offer here a grief counseling certification for those who are qualified to enter into the program to earn a 4-year certification. The link is below. Our number is 330-652-7776, and our email is info@AIHCP.org. I'd like to thank you for listening and have a good day.